Thank you all for joining me. I'm joined today by Brian Cain, a #1 international best-selling author, a speaker, consultant, and mental health coach. He's worked with people across the globe in mental health, including athletes from the NFL, NHL, PGA, MLB, and of course, fighters from the UFC, including the likes of GSP, Vitor Belfort, and Rich Franklin. Which brings us to our discussion today, mental health awareness for athletes and families who are currently quarantined. Brian, I appreciate you making time. Thank you for joining me today on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know you're very busy, I'm sure, at a time like this. I definitely have a small laundry list of questions that I'd like to ask you, get your expertise, opinion on. But before I do that, I'd like to ask just sort of a general question. What are you hearing most from some of your clients who are athletes and coaches, or even executives? What is some of the consensus, some of the more common questions or issues that you're coming across at this time?
They're all asking me the same question that you're asking, which is, hey, what are all the other athletes that you're working with doing? Because I don't think anyone knows necessarily what to do, because there's no blueprint, right? There's no blueprint for what to do during a pandemic or COVID-19. But I think that's the key. The key is that you have something to do. I don't think it's necessarily as important as what it is you're doing, as long as you have something to do. And what I mean by that is, the one thing that I suggest and get all my clients or athletes to do is create an agenda for yourself. Like when you're a UFC fighter and you're in a training camp, you have a really tight agenda for what you do on a day-to-day basis. And typically athletes perform better, and I think most people in general perform better when they have some structure and some routine. Well, all of our structure and routine got thrown off when we come home. But what we have to do is we have to create a new structure and a new routine based off of what we can do with what we have. So that's typically the first thing I go after. And I think that's what people are looking for, because they like to have a game plan. They like to know what to do, but they don't know because they've never been here before. So just come up with something to do and stick to that.
Okay. How important is mental awareness for athletes that are looking to make it past these circumstances that we're in this COVID-19 era, being quarantined? How important is the mental health aspect for them to return as strong as they were when they were set to the sidelines? Now, how important is it to not allow your mental health to deteriorate? As you know, these athletes that we're talking about are professionals, and they compete at a very elite level, and mental health is very important. So can you maybe just kind of paint that for us, that picture of just how important it is for them to keep up with their mental health?
Yeah, it's critical, and I think there's actually an opportunity, right? Every cloud has a silver lining. And I think there's an opportunity now for athletes during COVID-19 that they have more time. And some of them, that freaks them out that they have more time, because they'll maybe make some poor decisions with the time that they have. And sitting around in your pajamas until noon watching Netflix would be an example of a poor decision, right? So what we want them to do is, again, be proactive with having a program to follow. And that's exactly why I came out with what I call my 30 Days to Mental Performance Mastery for Athletes course. It just came out on April 7th. And right now is actually decided in December that it was going to come out on April 7th. It just happened to be during the COVID-19 season, or what I call the Corona season. And for athletes to go into this course now where they have more time than they've ever had, and they're going to have more time than they're ever going to have once we get back to a normal way of life, this is prime time for them to go in and start doing things that maybe they've never done before, such as practicing the art of meditation or mental imagery, such as creating a daily routine and structure, such as really tightening up their nutrition program, or things that maybe they've just kind of done haphazardly instead of really being all in on, because it takes time to prepare food. You have to get coaching in terms of what to eat, what not to eat, how to do it. So those are just some of the things that, from a mental health standpoint, you can look at this as, I'm a victim of the situation. I had a fight canceled. I can't do what I normally do. Or you can look at coming out of this being better than you were when you went in, because you're armed with more information, more structure, more strategy, and more tools that maybe you wouldn't have had the time to invest in if we hadn't had the situation.
Thank you. I understand completely. And I'll probably take some of that advice for myself as we continue this quarantine. And in this time, we're also experiencing quite a phenomenon of sorts, and the results of what I think it's probably obviously from social distancing. And it's that people are starting to leave their homes. They're taking walks, bike rides. They're enjoying nature. And this is probably at the highest rate in modern history. And I'm not exaggerating. People are outside enjoying nature and exercising, probably at the most we've ever seen. We can only hope that people continue being active after we resume the normal societal operations. So, and I would never say that this is in any way a blessing in disguise or put that notion on or anything like that. But in a sense, there is some silver lining and positivity that can come from a situation like this, and that's that people are learning the advantages and the benefits of going outside and simply exercising or just taking a walk.
Yeah, and two mindsets that I try to share with the athletes I work with. One is that your attitude is a decision, and choosing how you're going to respond to this situation is a decision. That is a choice, right? And it can either be the victim or the victor. It's either happening to you or happening for you. Another mentality that we share with them that you've probably heard Rich Franklin reference a lot is this was big for him in his career, and he talked about it in a recent interview that we did, is this concept of E plus R equals O, right? Event plus response equals outcome. And the event is the COVID-19. The response is I stay locked in my house and do nothing. Or like you're saying, the response is I get out and I keep my social distancing. I do it the right way, but I get out and do things that maybe I don't normally do. And I live here in Paradise Valley, Arizona. I live really close to the canal that goes up and down through like Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm a runner. So I go out and I run. I can't believe I just said I'm a runner. I did a 100-mile race in June. It took me 29 and a half hours. And I finally just said I'm a runner. I think it's the first time I've ever said that. I always say I don't like running. I like having ran, right? But I go and run. And it is true. I've seen more people on the canal running, riding mountain bikes, pushing their children now than I ever have. And I think some of that is because they're home. So hopefully you're absolutely right, Mark, that this is a way to press pause and evaluate a new sort of lifestyle. And I talk with athletes all the time about something I call the success cycle. And the success cycle goes like this. I prepare. It's no different for you or for a UFC fighter. I prepare, I perform, I reflect. I prepare, I perform, I reflect. I prepare for a show, I perform my show, I reflect, I get immediately back into my next preparation, right? So even in your cycle, Mark, which of those three areas, preparing, performing, or reflecting, gets the least amount of time?
Most likely the reflecting.
And it's like that way for everybody. But this is the time where we can reflect and say, am I living in alignment with the best version of myself? Am I doing what I truly want to do? Am I taking care of myself at the highest level? And I think this is a time for us to press pause and do that. And that might be part of why you see so many people being active and out in nature, because they know it's good for them. They just have always found something else to do.
Fair enough. On the other side of the coin, we're also seeing somewhat of an uptick in senseless social media activity. Although in this, I'm specifically from athletes, and I'm not speaking of any certain post or athlete, but we are seeing an uptick in social media activity that seems to be a little bit senseless, not of the norm. And although it does seem like it's fun, or they're killing time, it seems sometimes that the more time that goes on, some of these posts and social media activity kind of coming from maybe a darker place, possibly like, I'm not anyone to diagnose this by any means, but possibly some deterioration in mental health, which results in some of this senseless social media activity and some of these posts that just aren't the norm. Do you have any thoughts on that, or am I just kind of overthinking that?
Probably a little bit of both, maybe. But, I think what happens is when you're an athlete, and your career comes to an end. Okay. This is what happens a lot of times. And I've done a lot of research on like athlete career transition, because it happened to me as an athlete, is that when your career comes to an end, most people don't ride off into the sunset. They know they're going to retire. They know it's their last fight, or they know it's their last game, and they go on and they've made plenty of money and they have a great life. For most people, retirement happens like falling off a cliff. I get cut. I lose a contract. I'm not good enough, whatever it is. Boom. I think I'm going to play forever, and it just ends, right? And it never ends at the convenient time. So I think what we're experiencing here a little bit is that all these people's highly active lifestyle, highly on-stage lifestyle of performing has stopped, and they don't know what to do. So it's almost like they get an opportunity at that retirement / I don't call it retirement, because when you still have to work, you're not retired. You're just going in a new direction, right? So it's like they're having a little window of a career transition, and they're starting to try to find that significance in other ways that they used to be significant, where people would fill an arena to watch them compete. So I'm not surprised by that, because I think, again, when people don't know what to do and they want to stay relevant and they're used to hearing the cheers and the crowds and having the big bright lights, and those things aren't available anymore, they have to stay relevant. So they'll go and try to do that in sometimes destructive ways, instead of ways of looking at, hey, I have a platform as an athlete. And even though I'm not competing, what might I be able to do to sharpen a skill that would help me long-term? What might I be able to do to help serve my community as a person who has a positive platform that people are looking to from a leadership standpoint because of who I am?
Fair enough. So as we're very limited, and if you're just joining the program, on the line with me right now, Brian Cain, a #1 international best-selling author and also a consultant and mental health coach for athletes and executives and people around the world. Brian, we're very limited right now to what we can do, but what we're not limited to is planning for the future. So from your standpoint, what kind of realistic goals should athletes or coaches or parents of athletes, or anyone for that matter, be setting for themselves while they're currently forced to pause their work and social lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I go to is maximizing recovery, and looking at what I call the 4 fundamentals of optimal performance. So the 4 fundamentals of optimal performance, whether you're an athlete or not, is if you're a human being, these are the 4 fundamentals, right? And it's how you sleep, how you move, how you eat, and your mindset. Those 4 things, regardless of what profession you're in, have to be on point, or you're just not going to perform at an optimal level. So I think the place to go after is really tighten up my sleep routine. And if you look at any of the research on sleep, the guy I follow the most, Dr. James Moss, in his book Power Sleep, and there's a ton of research that he's done and others in the field would say, go to bed and get up at the same time every day and aim for that 9 hours and 15 minutes, which when I say 9 hours and 15 minutes is the research proven time for people to get, I don't know anybody that gets 9 hours and 15 minutes, because we're busy. Why are we busy? Because we're watching Netflix till 1 o'clock in the morning. That's why we think we're busy. So evaluate your lifestyle and start to prioritize your mental health and your physical health by starting with the sleep block, right? And then I look at, okay, what are you feeding your mindset with? Are you, I call it the E to E ratio. Are you constantly being entertained? And that's one of the things that's happened with sports now not being on TV, is people's primary source of entertainment has gone away. Or are you filling that with Tiger King and Netflix? Or are you filling it with maybe something that's educational, something about, reading an area, picking a topic? Let's say you want to get better with time management, or let's say you want to get better with strength and conditioning, or let's say you want to get better with nutrition, or whatever aspect you want to learn to speak Spanish, whatever. One of my NHL players is learning how to play the guitar. So trying to pick up a skill to keep your brain connected and active, which is more education than sitting down and getting entertainment all the time. So I think that's how you feed the mindset. So sleep, mindset, movement. Got to exercise every day. Get up and move your body. If you've been sedentary, this is a primary opportunity for you just to get out and go walk. And, whether it's you doing a challenge of 10 miles a day for the next 10 days or 10 minutes a day for the next 10 days, meet yourself where you're at. Don't compare yourself to anybody else, but just continually work to be that best version of you. Eat, sleep, movement, and mindset. Those would be the 4 things that I would go after from a fundamental standpoint right now, because you have the time and you can do all of those within the confines of your home.
Very good. You mentioned, how people are entertained so much and overly entertained, and I guess that's being stimulated in the general aspect, or in general sense, being stimulated. I was watching a YouTube channel, and it was some psychological, where they go into different theories, and it was about isolation, and the guy put himself in isolation for 3 days, and just the lack of stimulus, the lack of being stimulated, the man went crazy. I mean, he was the host of the show. So it's, I believe none of us are alone in this, as far as like the feelings and range of emotions that we might be feeling and stuff like that. And then secondly, it also reminds me of another experiment case study that was done. I'm sure you know about this one, or maybe passed by it on YouTube, where people are given the option to shock themselves there's a little bit of pain with the shock, and then they don't like it. It hurts, it's uncomfortable, and then they're placed in a room and they're told to wait for about a half an hour, and the device that shocks them is set next to them the whole time, and they're told, wait here, and if you'd like, you're more than welcome to shock yourself. basically after 10 minutes, most of these people were shocking themselves because of the lack of stimulant. They weren't being stimulated, and that just goes to show just how conditioned we are, and to be stimulated so much, and when we aren't, how it can really deteriorate our mental health. I'm not sure how much how much that goes with what you do with working with people, but it seems like it all kind of goes together.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember who it was that said that to be well adjusted to a sick society is not good mental health, right? So to be constantly stimulated, if you think about how many times you open up your cell phone on a daily basis, like we are highly stimulated. Like I heard this stat today when I was listening to a book when I was running that said we have more stimulation in things coming at us from a technology standpoint now than our ancestors had in their entire lifetime. And our brains are not necessarily wired to handle that. So, there's a lot of these, things that these meditation retreats that are popping up. I've not personally been to one yet, unfortunately, but a lot of my friends who are in that space, one who I highly respect, a former Navy SEAL commander, he's gone to these retreats, and they basically put you and they take away all outside stimulus for 5 days. And he says for like the first 2-3 days, it's miserable, but then you have a breakthrough. And when you have that breakthrough, you realize about how much of all the stimulus that you bring in that you don't need, that doesn't do anything positive for you, and that how much benefit there is to just being present. Like there's things that I've noticed. It's clear. It's going to sound weird saying this, but being at my house, I travel about 280 days a year, and I've been home, call it, for the last 40 days, which I haven't been here for 4 days in a row since we moved here in June of 18. So to be here for 40 straight days has been really, really cool, because I'm starting to notice things like the sunset, notice things like birds, notice things like the type of birds that I never even knew existed, because I just never paid attention to it because I was always dialed into something else, So it's almost like there's this whole world that we create with stimulus and entertainment, and there's a whole nother world that's around us that we never even notice because we're so tied into the digital leash. So I think one of the things that would be beneficial for people to do during this time, monitor the screen time and see if you can unplug yourself from that screen at an earlier time during the day. I call it like the screen curfew. Like I try to set a caffeine curfew for like 2:00 in the afternoon, because I know that if I take in caffeine after 2 p.m., I'm not going to be able to fall asleep around 9, which is when I ideally want to go to sleep. Now, if I need to stay awake for a fight or something at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, then I'm obviously going to be doing what I need to do to be in that environment and be sharp. But most of the time, I will cut the caffeine at 2, and I'll cut the food 2 hours before bed. So like at 7 o'clock, I try not to have any more food or water, no caffeine after 2, and I try to have no screens at least an hour before bed. And I've been trying to cut that back to 2 during the Corona season here. So I think those are things that people can play with to, again, try to free up and open up some of that digital addiction that we all have. There's a great book. By a guy named Cal Newport, who's a professor at went to MIT. He's a professor at Georgetown, computer science professor. And the book is called Digital Minimalism. And it talks about the concept of being well adjusted to a society that we're not necessarily wired to be living in with technology the way it is.
Digital leash is definitely, so I think that's the first time I've heard that phrase, but it really strikes a nerve, because that's what sometimes we feel like we're on, as a digital leash.
Yeah, I mean, think about how many times you go answer the phantom phone call, right? I mean, how many times do you grab your cell phone in your pocket because you think it just buzzed and you open it up and there's nothing? I mean, I do that daily. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe I'm the only crazy one, but
no,
I mean, that's
you're not alone,
leash, man. That's the digital leash. Like, ask yourself, when's the last time you went to dinner with a spouse or a girlfriend, or a significant other, and didn't bring the phone into the restaurant? Like, that's behavior that we want to try to address.
And that actually sounds like a really good habit, at least just to start off, is if you go out to a restaurant with your spouse or your loved one, or whatever the case, to leave the phone in the car. I think that's great. Or if you really, really have to take the phone in with you, put the phones in the middle, and the first person to touch their phone pays for the bill.
Pays for the bill. Yeah. I always give mine to my wife, and then if I need to, I mean, most, because we'll start talking about something and say, hey, what time does movie play? Well, one of us is going to have to grab our phone to look and see, But the phone can be, I mean, the phone is a beautiful tool. It just can, it's like fire. Fire is a great tool. It can cook you food. It can heat your house, but it can also burn your house down. It can also cook you if it gets out of control.
It's a great analogy. I really like that one. I know you have to get going very soon, so I just want to try to
Sure.
get through a couple more here if possible. Are you able to talk, if you can, about people, and this isn't just for athletes, this is for everybody.
Sure.
For people who are managing their emotions, and maybe you can talk about how to manage the emotions maybe more effectively, as we're experiencing, an overwhelming range of emotions. We're not a normal society. So what are some good tips you might be able to give to help managing those range of emotions without our normal outlets that we normally have to vent?
For sure. First one would be feelings are not facts. Just because you're feeling a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it is.
I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry,
Very
Brian.
good.
But I say that to my friends all the time, that feelings are choices.
Mm-hmm.
They hate me when I say that. They do not like hearing that.
Right. Because it puts accountability on the person. That's why they don't like it.
Okay.
It puts accountability on them to say your attitude and your, not necessarily your feelings, but the way you're responding to your feelings is a choice. Right? That is an attitude. That is a responsibility that we have as human beings. So one of my mentors and a friend who was in the military, he would say, you have to learn to respond to your response. Because he'd say, when you start getting shot at and you're in combat, you get nervous, you get scared, right? But you have to trust your training and you have to respond to that. And whether it was George St. Pierre, Rich Franklin, Vitor, Cowboy Cerrone, I mean, some of the who's who of a UFC have all told me in the locker room, they get nervous, they get scared. And as George St. Pierre said before the Michael Bisping fight,
he gets
right?
sick.
He said on ESPN, he said, I'm going to be afraid on Saturday night. Michael Bisping is going to be afraid on Saturday night. But I have some tools that I use. He calls it fake it till you make it. That by the time I get to the octagon, if my body language is big, if my focus is on what I can control, and my self-talk is in the moment, okay? Feelings, I'm going around in a circle here, but feelings are states. In states, whether it's depression, anxiety, excitement, energy, jubilation, happiness, they're all made up of three things: body language, energy, and body language, focus, and self-talk. I call it BFS. So however you're feeling, check in on your body language. Get up and move around. Check in on your focus. That's why I've stopped Google searching multiple times a day coronavirus, because everything that you look at it is going to be depressing. So I'll look at it once a day to catch up on the news, to see what's going on, so I'm not missing anything that might be affecting, me and where I'm living in terms of closures or staying kind or staying shit. You know what I'm talking about? I don't know exactly what it's called. But
it's a fluid situation. I understand.
Yeah, so you gotta
keep up.
You gotta know what's going on, but I don't need to look at it all day. And there's research that shows that when the bombing happened at the Boston Marathon, there was more PTSD to people who followed it constantly on the news than to people who were actually at the scene when it happened.
Wow.
So you have to be careful about what you're feeding yourself. I think that's a major message coming out of today, is instead of feeding yourself entertainment, TV, Netflix, because negative sells, and news is negative and it sells, feed yourself oxygen, air, exercise, move your body. So 1, feelings are not facts. 2, respond to your response. 3, act different than how you feel. 4, know it's the start that stops most people. So that's where I suggest when you wake up, make your AM routine. The first thing you do is you move and you sweat. I track this in my behavior every day. I call it sweat before screens. If I get in front of a computer screen like this, it's really hard to get me off of it because I love what I do. But I want to sweat first. And if I got to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get a sweat in before a 5:30 call that I had today, I'm in the Pacific time with an East Coast client, that's what I got to do to get it in. Because I know once I get in front of the computer, it's hard to stop. So people need to know themselves and be able to respond to those responses, but take a look at their behavior right now and take ownership of that behavior and ask, is what I'm doing the best thing for me right now? And if you're not feeling good, it's probably because you're not doing what's good for you.
You actually answered my next question. Relating to the spike in anxiety and depression. Yeah, I think you pretty much answered that. How these feelings can be reversible and how they are choices. So, do you still have a couple minutes? I know we were supposed to wrap. I just had 1 or 2.
Yeah, for sure. Let me add something. Let me add, if I can, something on that anxiety, depression.
Please do.
Which I think is great, is that a lot of times where anxiety and depression are rooted, right? Depression is rooted in an obsession with the past, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Anxiety is rooted in an obsession of the future, what's going to happen. Optimal performance and energy and where fulfillment comes from is being obsessed with like the now. What am I doing right now? What's important now? So if we think too much about the past, we're going to welcome on some of the depression of the things I should have maybe prepared or done differently to get me to where I'm at now. And if I obsess too much about the future, which is what's going to happen a lot, people are going to bring on that anxiety because we have no idea when this is going to end and no one does.
Thank you. Very good. Some stuff that I can definitely take in for myself. I appreciate that. So before I do let you go, I just had three more that is kind of more of a flash round that I wanted to get through, and they're all relating to 3 of your 10 pillars.
Sure.
So the first one is pillar number 3, focus and awareness. What can people do to keep our focus and awareness sharp to avoid the negative distractions and self-talk? Exactly what you were just talking about. What are some things that we can do to really control that focus and put it in the right places so that we're not turning CNN? As I look to my left, CNN, of course, is on my TV. But what are some of those things, that you would recommend to channel that focus properly?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, if I give you the quick office tour here, it's why you can see I got bookshelves over there, a wall here. I don't have a TV in the office for that reason, because it's a distraction. So I try to think about creating the environments for optimal. So no TV in my office, no TV in the bedroom. Another one in terms of help and focus, like eliminate the distractions, things you don't need. 2 would be practice the art of meditation. And there's apps Calm, there's apps Headspace that anybody you can get, and they give you free trials. And meditation is about being able to practice focus. The other one is if you go to briancain.com/cgrid, as in concentration grid, CGRID. There's an activity there that has been research proven to improve focus that you can do for free at my website. It's on a screen, so it may not be the best thing at this time because we have so much screen overload as it is. But I think the biggest thing to help with that focus is have a plan. Plan tomorrow, tonight. Know what you want to do before you wake up and your feet hit the ground. Otherwise, you're playing defense and life is happening to you. Have a plan for tomorrow, today. Wake up and play offense in terms of stringing together a good day.
That was amazing. That was some really good, very simple way to put something that means so much with such substance. To when you said that if you don't plan for tomorrow and you're going to end up waking up on the defense, and that really hit home. I think that will with a lot of people too. So very good. And now next is pillar number 8, time management and organization. What can athletes and coaches alike, what can they do to continue in these times to maintain sharp time management and organization skills? Because as we've mentioned earlier on this podcast, the routine is such a big part that plays into the mental health of an athlete. So what can be done when we're sitting here at home to just maintain sharp time management, organizational skills? I guess the easy answer would be to plan for the future when this blows over. But what can be done?
I would say plan for tomorrow and not worry about what's going to happen in the future, because we don't know. So when I started working with George St. Pierre, and his coaching staff of Phil Nurse, Jonathan Chambers was the strength coach. Firas Zahabi is the guy, I called him the head coach, the guy that put it all together, him and Greg Jackson. So there's a lot of people that were touching George, right? And one of the things that we looked at was like reverse engineering or working backwards a weekly plan. So there's 168 hours in a week. I call this my 168-hour plan. So I'll sit down on Sunday and map out what does the next 168 hours of my life look like. And I put them in time blocks. And the concept of time blocking, I picked up from, again, Cal Newport in his book, Deep Work. And he says, when you create like this 168-hour weekly routine, which if I were working with an MMA fighter and he was fighting for a title in 3 weeks, I would hope I would know exactly what we were doing over the course of these next 3 weeks. Like we'd have a 3-week plan, right? So we would have that 168-hour a week plan, and then we would go to work on it. Now it'd be different, obviously, if we had access to gyms and all that, but we don't. So make a 168-hour a week plan for what you have, and then play offense. And then as social creatures and human beings, do things you can with other people, such as like yesterday was Easter, and I got family in Chicago, family in Texas, family in Wisconsin. We jumped on a Zoom call and, had Easter dinner with each other from all over the country. I've heard now there's an app on your phone, Map My Run, which has been around forever, but you can create group challenges. So I'm in a group challenge with a couple of my high school athletic director friends from around the country, where we're trying to run at least 1 mile every day. So that today is April 13. So at the end of the day, I should have 13 miles in. So just things like that you can use to stay connected with people and keep social lines and communication open, but also have a healthy plan. Those are things that I think people can do.
Very good. And lastly, is pillar number 9, leadership. How can coaching staffs maintain leadership during these times when we all feel so vulnerable?
Yeah, I think one, expressing that vulnerability and also staying connected. And when I mean stay connected, it's one thing to say, I'm going to stay connected with my team. And I have one coach, the lacrosse coach at Marquette University, has a sheet of every one of his players on the left side and every date across the top side for the next 2 months. And every time they make a contact with one of their players, a coach goes in and says T for text, C for call, FT for FaceTime. And they keep track of those contacts. And their goal is no player goes 3 days without getting a contact from a coach. So they're actually measuring it. And measurement is motivation. And when you start to measure things, Mark, what happens is it becomes a game. And we all love playing games. It's why we're attracted to sports. All sport is just a game. So if you can make each day have a game of what you're trying to do for yourself and for others, it just becomes so much more fun and you can be more productive. And I think that gets people on the positive spiral instead of that negative one.
Brian, you've been an amazing guest today. I appreciate the generosity in your time. But before I do let you go, you've worked with so many people, I'm sure, through these times, and you will continue to. Is there anything that you would like to leave listeners and viewers with, just in terms of, just some extra, whether it be motivation or some tips to get through this?
100%. Please write this phone number down. One of my friends and mentors, Dr. Rob Gilbert, is a professor of sports psychology at Montclair State in New Jersey. He's been a professor for over 40 years. January 22nd, 1992, he left a 3-minute message on an answering machine, asked his students to call in and listen. He called it Success Hotline. 10,600 days later, Mark, he's still leaving messages on Success Hotline. I first heard of Success Hotline and Dr. Rob Gilbert and met him at a seminar in 2006 in March. I remember it clear as day because it changed my life. And I've called Success Hotline pretty much every day since. And every day he leaves a 3-minute message on an answering machine. All you do is call and listen. You can call 24 hours a day. He never picks up, but you can leave him a message and he will call you back, or you can dedicate a message to somebody. And I can tell you this, I've worked with 5 UFC world champions: St. Pierre, Rashad Evans, Rich Franklin, Michael Bisping, Vitor Belfort, other names like Keith Jardine, Cowboy Cerrone, and some of the best guys outside of MMA, Kyler Murray, Heisman Trophy winner, first pick in the football draft, NFL Rookie of the Year, David Price, Jake Arrieta, both Cy Young Award winners in Major League Baseball. And I have offered what I have shared with them and all of my other clients. I bet you 75% of what I talk about and what we've talked about today has come directly from Success Hotline since 2006. So the phone number I would encourage people to put into their phone and call every day is 973-743-4690. I'll say it again. Success Hotline, Dr. Rob Gilbert, 973-743-4690. Call and give a listen every day. I've been calling multiple times during the Corona season.
Wonderful. Brian Cain, thank you for joining me. You can follow Brian on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Brian Cain Peak, and visit briancain.com, where you can also check out his Peak Performance podcast, pick up his bestsellers on Amazon, search Brian Cain, The 10 Pillars, and The 1% Intention. Brian, thank you for your time.
Mark, thanks for having me, man. Best to everybody who's listening, and know this too shall pass.
Very good. Thank you, Brian Cain.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Hit that subscribe button down there. And when you're done with that, go on over to Instagram and Twitter and follow us at The Octagram, and on Facebook.com/TheOctagramMMA.